It didn't start with a conversation. It starts with a scanned mortgage notice and a sticky note that reads, "We need you to help Madison. Again." The email had no subject line. Typical. Just an attachment. Mortgage past due scan. 3.0123456789012 3456789 3456789 3456789 3456789 45 6789 3456789 3456789 456 789 456 789 456 789 456 789 67890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012345678901234567890123456789012 0123456 789 0123 456 789 0123 456 789 0123 456 789 012345 6789 0123 456 789 0123 456 789 0123 456 789 0123 456 789 012 345 6789 012345 6789 0123 45 6789 0123 45 6789 0123 45 6789 012 345 6789 0123 456 789 0123 4567 8901 23 456 789 0123 4567 890 4567 890 4567 890 34567 890 4567 890 3456 789 012 345 67890 12346 789012345 6789012 345 6789012 6789 012 345 6789 01 234 56789 012 345 6789 012 345 6789 01 234 5678901 234 56789 01 234 5678. Emily opened it automatically. Reflects more than intent, like how you might flinch before realizing the slap hasn't landed yet. She scrolled. $38,452.87 past due. Then her eyes drifted to the note. Again. The room was quiet, save for the soft rattle of rain tapping against the glass panes. Her condo smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon, leftovers from the dinner she'd half-cooked and abandoned on the stovetop. The pasta was cooling in a pot, the sauce untouched. She stared at the screen, one elbow resting on the marble kitchen island, and wondered how long it had taken her mother to type that sentence. Had she hesitated? Had she paused, thinking Emily might finally say no? A second email followed almost instantly. No attachment this time. Just words. She's your sister. We raised you better. Emily closed the lid of her laptop slowly, as though the gesture might stop the message from sinking any deeper into her gut. We raised you better. The same line they'd used when she skipped Madison's bridal shower to attend a job interview in Seattle. The same line when she hesitated to co-sign a car loan. The same line when she gently reminded them she still had student loans of her own. She sat down on the gray couch, pulling the wool throw over her lap out of habit. Outside, the rain picked up. Each droplet smacked the window like a small reminder. Present, present, present. Her phone buzzed, and she knew even before looking. Not Madison. Not yet. It was Martha. Mom. She's having a hard time. I told her you'd help. You always do. That last line was the dagger, disguised as a compliment. You always do. And if you don't now, who does that make you? Emily took a long breath. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard of her phone. For once, there was no tremble in her hand. No script to reread. No paragraph to rewrite. She typed slowly, deliberately. Emily, I can't help this time. I'm sorry. She stared at the words. There was a power in their simplicity, the kind that didn't shout but didn't shrink either. She didn't justify, didn't elaborate. Just... No. The silence that followed was almost a relief. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The rain drummed on. The pasta in the pot was now gluey, forgotten. She stood to pour a glass of wine, and then her phone lit up again. Madison. Wow, even you turned your back. Guess blood really doesn't matter. Emily didn't respond. She stared at the screen for a long while. Not because she was hurt, not because she was unsure. She was angry, and not for Madison's words, but for how familiar they felt, like lines from a well-worn script handed to her again and again. She placed the phone down gently on the counter and stared out the window. The rain hadn't let up. It rarely did in Pinefield this time of year. Everything was gray and still and yet oddly peaceful. Her reflection stared back at her, dull shadows of herself overlaid on the glass. But behind her eyes was something sharper now, something finally past tired. She whispered to herself, letting the words settle like the first stone placed in a new foundation. It was never about blood. It was always about control. When my father called, he didn't yell. He sobbed. I thought you were better than this. Emily had just ended a client meeting and was jotting down a few follow-up notes when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw the name Dad appear in capital letters. No emojis, no hearts. Just formal, clinical, like everything he did. For a fleeting second, she wondered if he might be calling to check on her. Maybe, just maybe, someone had finally asked how she was. Not what she could give. But as soon as she picked up, all illusion crumbled. I thought you were better than this, Richard repeated, his voice cracking, not from sadness, but from the well-practiced cadence of disappointment. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a verdict. Emily swiveled slightly in her office chair, back to the glass wall behind her. The sun was pouring into the room, highlighting every speck of dust in the sterile white space. It felt too bright for this conversation. I'm at work, she said softly. I know, he replied. And I'm sure that's going great. Just like your condo, your new car, your freedom to say no when your sister's about to lose her house. She paused. Not because she didn't have a response. She had dozens, but because none of them mattered to him. They never had. You know I've helped before, she said. I paid off her surgery bill when she didn't have insurance. I gave up my college fund so she could have hers after she failed her first semester. I covered rent when she got divorced. Twice. This isn't about being selfish. It's about finally stopping the cycle. There was a pause on the other end. Not silence, exactly. Something colder. That's a comfortable perspective to have, Richard said evenly. But comfort's always been your poison, Emily. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they echoed something he'd told her since she was a child. Family comes before comfort. Back then, it had meant sharing her room with a screaming infant Madison. Later, it meant forgoing her study abroad trip because Madison needed braces. It meant missed opportunities. It meant silence when she cried. And now it meant she was supposed to bleed money into a pit and say thank you for being needed. Comfort isn't a crime, she said. And stability isn't a license for servitude. That silence came again. And then, that low, deliberate tone she recognized instantly. It was the same one he used when she'd refused to go to Madison's baby shower, or when she'd declined to host Thanksgiving after working 60-hour weeks. Well, Richard said, then don't be shocked by what happens next. He didn't yell. He didn't hang up. He let those words hang like ice in the air. And then the line went dead. Emily sat motionless for a full minute. Her heart wasn't racing. There was no dramatic swell of emotion, no sudden sobs, just a quiet, clean void. She stared out the window where cars moved like orderly little ants below, busy with their lives, unburdened by gilt tapestries and generational demands. She saw a woman on the sidewalk carrying groceries with a toddler trailing behind her, their laughter faint through the glass. The world was moving on, indifferent, radiant, alive. She exhaled, a long, measured breath. They would retaliate. She could feel it in the way her father said next, as if something had already been set in motion. But this time, she wouldn't apologize for not flinching. She wouldn't brace for impact. She would meet it head on. 2 weeks later, I received an envelope. Not a letter, a lawsuit. It was propped against the base of her front door, slightly damp at one edge from the morning drizzle. Thick, off-white, with her name spelled in perfect legal font. Not handwriting, not a stamp of affection, just printed authority, stiff and impersonal. Emily picked it up with a slow, practiced calm, the same way one might handle a dead wasp. Careful not to touch the stinger, though it had already done its damage. Inside, the papers were orderly, pages stapled with bright blue tabs, her name again and again, her address, her email, her intent. Plaintiff, Martha and Richard Temple. Defendant, Emily Temple. Cause, breach of implied financial agreement. She stood at the kitchen counter. The toast she had set down earlier was still resting in the toaster, half ejected, crust curling as it cooled. Her coffee sat untouched beside it, milk having formed a pale skin across the top. She read the claim once, then again, and once more slower. It alleged that she had, in writing, committed to supporting Madison as long as she needs it. The evidence? A years-old email, sent after Madison's second divorce, where Emily had written in response to a desperate message, "I'll always help you. You're my sister." There it was. 6 words, plucked from context, stripped of circumstance, now wielded as a contractual noose. Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even sit down. She stood in the same spot for 10 minutes, the microwave's digital clock blinking silently, reminding her she was still in motion, still in a day that hadn't yet collapsed. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder for her 10:30 client check-in. She pressed and held it. Delete event. Then she dialed the office. "Hi, this is Emily," she said, keeping her voice even. "I won't be coming in today. Possibly not tomorrow either." Her manager didn't ask questions. Emily had rarely taken time off. That was her role. Reliable, stable, the first one in and last one out. The one who kept her promises. She hung up and looked around the kitchen. Everything was pristine. White cabinets, polished silver appliances, countertop orchids perfectly alive. She turned toward the microwave, drawn not to heat anything, but to her reflection. Dim and metallic, her face looked unfamiliar. Harder around the eyes. Her mouth a single, unreadable line. "This ends here," she said. Not to the room, not to herself even, but to the whole system that had taken root inside her life, dressed in the mask of family, weighted in obligation. This wasn't disappointment anymore. This was war. She gathered the documents, stacking them neatly beside the coffee. Her hands moved automatically. Dishwasher still humming softly in the background, oblivious. The ordinary sounds of a world that kept functioning even when yours cracked wide open. Then, just as she was about to slide her phone into airplane mode, an email pinged. Subject: Legal support inquiry. Reed Temple vs. Temple. From Alex Reed, Ms. Temple. I came across your case this morning. If you're open to discussing options, I believe I can help. Alex Reed. J.D. Emily stared at the screen. Not Martha. Not Richard. Not another threat. Not another bill. Help. The word for once didn't come dressed in strings. She didn't know who Alex Reed was. Not yet. But something in the tone, measured, professional, unexpected, made her set the lawsuit aside and exhale for the first time that morning. Maybe she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe, for once, someone wanted to help her. I barely remember Alex Reed from college, but he reminded me. And he reminded Madison, too. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. Not unpleasant, just overfamiliar, like a room that refused to change character no matter who entered. It was early afternoon, and the tables were mostly occupied by laptops and half-drunk lattes. Emily had chosen this place for its neutrality. No emotional history, no family memories tucked into its corners. Just a public stage with a locked back patio exit. Just in case. Alex was already there. He stood when she approached, tall but not imposing. His dark gray suit slightly creased at the elbow like he'd driven in from the city without stopping. His hair was a little thinner than she remembered, but the eyes, still a soft kind of serious, like he was always 3 thoughts ahead but polite enough not to say. "Emily Temple," he said, smiling, then held up a hand. "Or just Emily. I'm guessing nobody calls you by your last name unless it's bad news." She let out a breath. "Correct." They shook hands, then sat. He'd chosen a table in the corner, facing the room. Legal instinct. Always watch the exits. "You probably don't remember me," he began, but there was no accusation in his tone. "I do, vaguely," she admitted. "You did the pre-law track, mock trials, big debates." "Correction," he said, amused. "One mock trial. I froze halfway through my opening statement." Madison laughed the hardest. "You didn't." Emily blinked. That surfaced. The dim auditorium, the echo of his stammer. Madison's sharp laugh from the second row. And yes, Emily's own discomfort. Quiet, but palpable. She hadn't known Alex, but she'd looked at Madison with something between shame and distance. "I didn't like how she treated people," she said quietly. "I remember that too." The server brought her coffee. Alex had already ordered a tea. Black, untouched. He waited until the clatter of the tray subsided before sliding a small folder across the table. "I saw the filing through a friend who works records in the county clerk's office. We keep tabs on outliers. Yours was unique." Emily touched the folder but didn't open it yet. "Let me guess," she said. "Not every breach of contract suit features the word family 23 times in the opening statement?" "Close. 25. She smirked. "And you reached out because I know what it's like to have your name twisted into an obligation. And because this is more than a bad legal joke. It's a pattern." Alex leaned forward, his elbows on the smooth wood. "I'm not here to pressure you. You don't owe me anything. I'm offering to look deeper. Pro bono for now. Just to help you understand what you're up against." Emily hesitated. Everything in her was coiled. Her mother's voice, her father's judgments, the line from the lawsuit, that cursed email. "I'll always help you." She had never meant it as a binding contract, just a sister's reassurance in a fragile moment. "Do you think they actually believe they have a case?" she asked. Alex opened the folder, a printout of her email to Madison, bank transfers, a list of past payments, presumably from Discovery. He turned one sheet around and tapped it gently. "They believe they've trained you well enough to make you feel like you owe them a win. That's different from having a case." She said nothing, but the heat in her chest began to shift. No longer shame, not quite anger. Something sharper, clarifying. "They've used your kindness like an ATM with no PIN," he said flatly. Emily blinked. That landed harder than expected. "And the moment you changed the code," he continued, "they decided the machine was broken." It was the cleanest summary of her family dynamic she'd ever heard. No metaphors, no therapy speak. Just truth, stated like a billing line item. She finally opened the folder and skimmed the rest. He had organized her financial documents better than she ever had. Labeled them. Highlighted cross-references. No chaos. No guilt-laced annotations. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small legal pad. Tearing a sheet free, he slid it across. "They may have a claim, but you have a case." Emily looked down. On the yellow paper, in his careful handwriting, was a list of statutes, potential defenses, and a single phrase circled in blue ink. Undue burden of expectation. She wasn't sure if that was a legal term or a life diagnosis. Maybe both. She folded the paper slowly and tucked it into her bag. Her fingers trembled just enough for her to notice, but not enough for him to point out. "Okay," she said, voice low. "Where do we start?" Alex smiled, not triumphant, but steady. Where they never thought you would, he said, with yourself choosing not to give in. In the space between their cups and the noise of the cafe, a new kind of alliance formed. Not dramatic, not sealed by blood, but held together by something more enduring. Clarity. I never kept track, I said. Alex did. He tallied everything. I couldn't breathe. The room smelled faintly of toner and lemon cleaner. Alex's office wasn't large, maybe the size of her mother's laundry room, but every square foot hummed with quiet purpose. File boxes lined one wall like sentries, and 3 stacks of labeled folders towered at the edge of his desk, held in place by a chipped ceramic mug that read, "Civil Not Savage." It would have been funny on any other day. Emily sat across from him, the hardback chair cold against her spine. The air conditioning ticked faintly in the ceiling, and she counted each beat like a metronome for her anxiety. Alex didn't sugarcoat anything. He rotated his monitor to face her and tapped the screen with a capped highlighter. These are just the bank-confirmed transfers, not the grocery runs, gas money, or the time you dipped into your 401k to cover Madison's lease break fee. The spreadsheet stretched downward like a scroll of regret. Dates, vendors, account numbers, and notes. 2016, $12,000, hospital deductible for Madison's ER visit. 2017, $3,500, bail bond, Madison's minor traffic violation, unpaid fine. 2018, $6,700. Tuition gap semester. 2019, $15,000. Down payment cosign on car she later totaled. 2020, $8,900, rent support during job transition. And so on, year after year. The total at the bottom blinked like a dare. $183,287.52. Emily leaned back, her fingers curling against the fabric of her slacks. She had seen some of the damage in fragments, in fleeting credit alerts and late-night transfers. But seeing it lined up, clinical, itemized, was like being handed a death certificate for a part of herself she never realized had bled out. I didn't, she began, but her voice cracked. I thought it was just what you did. For family, Alex sat still, watching, not judging, waiting for the emotion to settle into something she could hold. I know, he said gently. That's what made you an easy target. Emily swallowed hard. And you're saying this gives me grounds? It gives you leverage, and potentially a legal foundation for a counterclaim, especially if we establish coercion or undue financial burden. But they'll spin it, she said. They'll say I gave it willingly, that it was charity. They'll try, he agreed. But we have a different story, one told by documents, not sentiment. He pulled out a printed report and handed it to her. It was a breakdown. Each transfer matched against emails or texts. One line read, Madison, I can't keep doing this. The reply, then don't be surprised if I end up homeless. That's on you. Blackmail in casual font. Emily stared at it, jaw tightening. She hadn't seen that message since the day she received it, but it had burrowed deep. Now, in this light, it was repugnant. How long have you been compiling all this? She asked. Since you walked into the cafe, Alex replied. I don't take on family cases unless the patterns are airtight. There was a soft knock on the door. His assistant, a young woman in her 20s with dark braids and quiet eyes, entered silently and placed a mug of coffee on the table. She nodded at Emily before slipping out. No chatter, just function. Alex waited until the door clicked shut, then leaned forward. They've built their comfort on your silence, he said. Time to speak. Emily didn't respond right away. She studied her hands, the faint half-moons pressed into her palms from clenching too hard. Her whole life had been lived in the spaces between what's expected and what's fair. But now there was a stack of paper in front of her. Paper that didn't ask her to justify her exhaustion or translate her worth into familial currency. Paper that simply said, "Here's the math. Here's the theft." He reached into his drawer and handed her a sealed envelope. "She called this morning," he said. "Your Aunt Carol. She's ready to testify." Emily blinked, stunned. Carol, her mother's estranged younger sister, hadn't been to a family holiday in over a decade. She remembered her mostly as the woman who refused to be guilted into anything and paid a high price in silence for it. "She saw the online filing," Alex explained. "Apparently, she's been waiting years for someone else in the family to stop playing nice." Emily took the envelope. Inside was a statement, handwritten. 3 pages. She would read it later, slowly, maybe with wine and a locked door. But just knowing it existed made her spine straighten. She looked up at Alex. "We're not just defending anymore, are we?" He smiled. "No, Emily. Now we start building." And for the first time in weeks, she felt something break. Not inside her, but off her. The weight of obligation, slowly lifting. Not gone, but weakening. She wasn't just a name on a lawsuit anymore. She was about to become a force. Carol didn't knock. She just walked in, handed me a folder, and said, "They stole from me too." I hadn't seen her in over 5 years, maybe more. The last time we were in the same room was Grandma June's funeral, where she stood in the back in a navy coat and left before the final hymn. No hugs, no eye contact, just absence. The door clicked shut behind her. She stood in my condo's small entryway like she owned the ground beneath her feet. Sharp cheekbones, salt and pepper hair pulled into a bun, eyes that looked like they'd stopped forgiving people years ago. She didn't wait for pleasantries, just walked straight to the kitchen table, dropped her purse on the chair, and set down a manila folder thick with papers. I blinked. "Coffee. Number. But thank you." Her voice was dry, scratchy, but strong. "What I need is for you to read that." I opened the folder. The first page was an old photocopy. An official-looking will, complete with a notary stamp. I read the name. Kenneth M. Harper, my grandfather. "He left everything to me," Carol said. "Equal shares with Martha. Equal. But after he passed, your mother convinced me it was for the best that she handled everything. Said I was too young to manage property. I signed over my part without a lawyer. I was 23. I looked up at her. "Why are you showing me this now?" Carol didn't sit. She leaned against the back of the chair. "Because I thought I was the only fool in the family, until I saw your name on that lawsuit. And I thought, maybe the virus didn't spread to everyone after all." The rain outside began to pick up, soft patters against the window. I pulled the folder closer, flipping through notarized deeds, email printouts, even a scanned photograph of her and Grandpa standing beside the house I vaguely remembered visiting as a kid. Alex's voice from a few days ago echoed in my head. This isn't the first time they rewrote a will. Number it wasn't. They built a house on lies, Carol said, stepping closer. "Let's burn it legally." There was a fire in her tone, but not the reckless kind. It was controlled, aimed, a fuse waiting to be lit. I thought I'd been alone in this, that my refusal to pay Madison's mortgage had been the first real crack. But the fracture ran deeper, years back, generations even. I picked up a worn photo tucked in the folder. It was dated 1984. Grandpa's handwriting on the back. "To my girls. May you never forget what's yours." I swallowed hard. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "I tried once," Carol said. "Martha threatened to cut off Mom's nursing care. Said I'd bankrupt the whole family if I fought. So I didn't." I sat down slowly. My knees felt unsteady, like they no longer believed in their own strength. She continued. "But you? You're already outcast. You've got nothing to lose. That makes you more dangerous than I ever was." Dangerous. That word clung to the air like smoke. I picked up my phone. thumb hovering. Alex needs to see this. She nodded. Tell him I'm available. I'll testify. I'll hand over originals. I'll do whatever it takes. I've been waiting decades for this moment. The call connected, and I heard Alex's steady voice on the other end. I barely got the words out before he asked, "She has the documents?" I looked at Carol. She was already gathering them back into the folder, ready to scan, to sign, to stand. "Yes," I said. "She does." Alex didn't hesitate. "Then we've just shifted from defense to offense. I'll schedule a deposition." When the call ended, I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling I stared at the night Madison's mortgage notice arrived. The same ceiling I counted cracks in when my father said I disappointed him. But now? That ceiling felt lower, like it might just collapse from the weight of buried truths finally crawling out. Carol walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. "They won't go quietly." "I'm not expecting quiet," I replied. "I'm expecting war." She gave a small, approving smile. "Then you're ready." And then she was gone. The condo fell silent again, but the silence felt different this time. Not heavy. Just waiting. I stared at the folder still sitting on the table. My family had rewritten stories, painted betrayals as sacrifices, and disguised theft as duty. But with Carol beside me, the narrative was finally changing. I whispered, barely above breath. "Then let's start with Madison's foundation." Alex found it buried in a 2008 tax form, an unlisted payment Madison never reported. Emily hadn't expected anything significant from the dusty folders they pulled from the archive basement, just more of the same blurred scans and outdated addresses. But the line item was unmistakable. $12,000 transferred to a joint mortgage, listing Emily J. Lancaster as the cosigner. The problem? Emily had never signed a mortgage with Madison. She remembered that year too well. Madison had called in tears over a broken-down car, and Emily, believing she was the responsible one, offered to help with the down payment. She wired the money, no questions asked. But Madison had clearly taken more than the cash. She'd taken her identity. "Wait," Emily whispered, flipping the page back. "That's my social security number." Alex didn't respond right away. His fingers flew over his laptop keyboard, pulling property records, tax filings, and obscure digital footprints from data storage most people never knew existed. The small filing center buzzed with the faint sound of a printer in the background, but otherwise it felt like they were working in a vacuum. No time, no noise, just facts pressing harder against memory. "There's more," Alex finally said, his voice tight. "In 2010, she refinanced. Still under your name. And then again in 2014, Emily's stomach twisted. So she's been using my credit profile to build equity for years." He nodded, eyes dark. "And the real kicker? She listed you as inactive party, meaning you have no control, but you're still liable." A clerk passed by their table and paused briefly, offering a polite smile before disappearing behind another stack of dusty boxes. Emily barely noticed. Her hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. "This isn't just betrayal," she said. "It's fraud. And it's long-term, systematic." Alex didn't flinch. "We need to file a supplemental motion. This changes everything." She nodded slowly, biting the inside of her cheek. "Will it hold up?" "If we present it cleanly, yes," he said. "Especially if we tie the pattern of deceit across family members. Your Aunt Carol's statement, plus these records, it's compelling." Emily's mind raced. What else had Madison taken? What else had her parents let happen? Every gift, every dollar, every sacrifice. They weren't gestures of love. They were deposits into a system built on her silence. They moved to a computer terminal at the side of the archive room. Alex logged into the state filing portal and began submitting scanned copies, timestamps, annotations. Emily watched the screen as her name, once tethered so closely to guilt and obligation, began to take on a new shape. Proof, evidence, voice. When they finished, it was nearly 5 p.m. The sun had dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the tiled floor. Emily leaned back in her chair, exhausted but focused. "She didn't just use me," Emily murmured, her voice steady. "She impersonated me." Alex glanced at her, and she left fingerprints all over the crime scene. Just as they stood to leave, Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced down. "Mom." She hesitated before answering, heart already bracing. Martha didn't scream. Her voice was cool, calculated. "You really want this to go public? You think you'll win?" The lawyer for my parents looked like a dentist. Polished smile, surgical hands, hiding sharp instruments. Emily had expected hostility. Thick, clumsy threats, maybe raised voices. But instead, Mr. Grant, the family's attorney, greeted her like an old friend. His handshake was firm but dry, like old paper. The law office was sterilized into blandness. Beige walls, faux wood trim, and a glass bowl of peppermint candies on the table between them. The mint smelled faintly medicinal, a reminder that even sweetness here had a warning label. She glanced sideways at Alex, who gave a single nod. The court reporter's machine clicked quietly in the corner, a rhythm of impartial memory. This was the first official deposition in the civil case filed against her. Not a courtroom yet, but a battleground just the same. Grant adjusted his tie and folded his hands. "Ms. Alden," he began, "we appreciate your cooperation today. This can be unpleasant, but necessary." Emily offered no smile. "Let's just begin." Grant leaned forward. "You've been providing financial support to your sister Madison for over a decade, is that correct?" "I've helped," she said, when asked, not under contract. "But consistently, yes?" "Consistently doesn't mean perpetually," she replied, voice even. "It means I didn't know how to say no. Until now." Grant's lips curled slightly. "And would you say your relationship with your family changed? Adversely, after you began a romantic relationship or a significant life change?" Alex cut in. "Objection. Irrelevant. There's no relationship in question except the financial one." Grant shrugged as if to say, "Just exploring motives." Of course, of course." Emily clasped her hands under the table, keeping her breathing steady. The questions continued. Probing, insinuating, dressed as inquiry but soaked in presumption. The air conditioning hummed, masking the slight scrape of her heel tapping beneath the chair. "Let's move to the 2016 support email," Grant said, sliding a printed copy across the table. It reads, and I quote, "I'll always help you, Maddie, I swear it." Seems like a binding promise, wouldn't you say? Emily barely blinked. I was 25. She'd just been diagnosed with something they said might be cancer. It wasn't. And that email was a comfort, not a contract. Grant nodded, performing agreement but filing her words away like tools for later surgery. "I understand. Still, this was entered as part of the ongoing claim for breach of informal agreement." "And what about the 2008 tax filings?" Alex interjected, calm but sharp. "Where Madison claimed property interest using Emily's social security number without her consent?" Grant turned his page slowly. "I believe that's being reviewed separately." Alex leaned forward. "It's part of the same pattern." Grant tapped the paper in front of him. "If we start tallying perceived wrongs, we'll be here all month." "Let's," Emily said quietly. "I've got time." A flicker of something, annoyance, maybe unease, passed behind Grant's eyes. "Do you recall signing a mutual family agreement in 2012, Ms. Alden?" he asked next. Emily's brow furrowed. "I don't know what that is." "It was supposedly discussed after your grandmother's estate was divided. You were, how shall I put it, entrusted to manage the overflow. The surplus accounts?" "There was no surplus," she said, "and I never signed any agreement." Grant made a show of flipping pages, sighing. "Well, perhaps we're mistaken." But his voice was brittle. Alex's gaze sharpened. Actually, he said evenly, can you submit that mutual agreement as evidence? The room paused. Even the reporter looked up briefly, then resumed typing. Grant shifted in his seat. I'm not sure it's necessary. It may not be available in full. Emily's voice was colder now. You mean it doesn't exist? I mean, Grant said carefully, we can revisit it. You just perjured your client. Her voice cut like dry ice. No heat, just frostbite. Alex didn't even move. The silence was thicker than anything spoken. Emily leaned back in her chair. The distance between her and the man representing her parents felt measured not in feet, but in years of exploitation. She didn't smile, but she didn't flinch either. She had stopped being afraid the moment she stepped into the building. Madison posted on Facebook. Can't believe my own sister is suing us. Blood means nothing these days. Emily read the sentence once, then again. Her phone buzzed with a stream of notifications. Likes, comments, subtle gasps disguised as empathy. Some of the names made her chest tighten. Old classmates, second cousins, co-workers from jobs long since left. Most hadn't spoken to her in years. Now they weighed in with cheap grief emojis and phrases like praying for healing or family first. She turned off the screen, but the post wouldn't stay digital. It followed her. At the coffee shop the next morning, the barista hesitated before calling out her order. Decaf oat latte for Emily? The girl's eyes flicked up, curious. Polite, but sharp. Emily took the cup and nodded, her throat dry. When she sat by the window, she felt it. A tremor in the room, whispers just out of earshot. Two women leaned toward each other over their laptops, murmuring, glancing her way, pretending not to. She didn't need to hear the words. She knew them already. That afternoon, back at her office, Julie, her overly cheerful coworker, knocked on the edge of her cubicle. Hey, Julie smiled, too tight. Just wanted to give you a heads up. They're pulling you from the Miller pitch next week. Emily blinked. Why? Julie shifted uncomfortably. Apparently Miller's wife saw something online. Said it might be bad optics to put you forward during all this press? There's no press, Emily said, flat. Julie raised an apologetic hand. I know, it's all just social, but you know how it goes. Clients get twitchy. Emily nodded once, then turned back to her screen. Her cursor blinked on an empty document. Later that evening at the grocery store, she bumped carts with Mr. Halberd, the neighbor from 2 doors down. He smiled too quickly, then cleared his throat. Tough week, huh? Family stuff can be messy. She offered a neutral hum and reached for a can of black beans. He didn't move away. My niece once sued her brother over a boat. Tore the whole family apart. Still not the same. I'm not suing over a boat, she said, still not meeting his eyes. No, of course not. I just meant, well, hang in there. Back in her car, she gripped the steering wheel with both hands. The air felt thick, the silence pressing against her ribs. She hadn't cried when she received the lawsuit. Not when her father implied disownment. Not even when Carol told her about the stolen will. But this slow erosion of identity, the public miscasting of her as a greedy traitor, this was different. It wasn't the loss of love. It was the theft of narrative. She called Alex. They're dragging me through the town square, she said, voice low. I know, he replied. You ready to fight back? I thought I was. Then let's do it their way, but better. Emily didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. That night, she sat at her kitchen counter with her laptop. She didn't write a post, didn't tag anyone, didn't rant. She simply uploaded a single image, a scanned receipt, $15,300, paid directly to a college bursar in 2013. Her name on the sender line, Madison's name on the tuition account. No caption, no comment. She closed the laptop, took a shower, went to bed. Within the hour, Madison's post vanished. So did Martha's comment thread. No one messaged Emily to apologize. But the silence finally shifted from hostile to uncertain. Carol brought me a flash drive. He recorded everything, she said, even the night they made me sign. Emily didn't reach for it immediately. The flash drive sat between them like something alive, still humming with whatever secrets it held. Carol's hands, usually so steady, trembled just slightly as she placed a mug of black coffee on the table. Her farmhouse creaked softly above them, wind brushing against the slanted attic roof. The air smelled of dust and cedar wood, aged memories clinging to the insulation. I found it cleaning out his truck, Carol said. Your uncle never deleted anything. He told me once, one day they'll trip on their own rope. I didn't believe him then. Maybe I didn't want to. Emily nodded, barely breathing. She slipped the drive into her laptop. It took a moment to load. Then the static cleared, and the voices began. You'll sign this, Martha's voice snapped. Younger but unmistakable, sharp, composed, polished like steel. Carol's voice wavered in reply. I don't think I understand. There's nothing to understand, Richard cut in. Dad wanted peace. You stir trouble, you get nothing. There was a shuffle, papers moving, a pen clinking on ceramic. But I was named executor, Carol protested. You were, Martha said, until we realized what that meant for us. We're just helping the family move on. You always said you didn't care about money. Silence. Then Carol again, barely audible. You said you'd take care of me if I let it go. We are taking care of you, Martha replied, the words coated in sugar and ice. Look around. You have a house. You're not on the streets. Don't make us rethink that generosity. Click. The recording ended. Emily hadn't moved. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. She blinked once, then again. Carol exhaled slowly. I wasn't brave back then. I told myself it was just money, that blood was more important. Emily spoke, but her voice was distant. She leveraged your silence. She weaponized it, Carol said. They always do. They sat in the attic, surrounded by old tax forms, faded photographs, and the ghosts of a family that knew how to smile in public and steal in private. Later that night, they scanned the drive and filed it. Alex responded within minutes. We can file under spoliation, he said. Evidence suppression, coercion, and inheritance fraud. Emily paced the hallway. Will it matter? It will, he said. It changes the frame. This isn't just about emotional leverage. It's about legal intent. She paused at a framed photo near the staircase. Her younger self, maybe 12, arms around Madison, grinning like she didn't know she'd spend adulthood untangling the cost of that embrace. I feel like we're setting fire to the house, she murmured. We're exposing what was already burning, Carol said from the kitchen. Emily turned to face her aunt. If she did it to me, Carol said, not blinking, she'll do worse to you. Use it. That night, Emily stood at the window of her condo, the city faint behind rain-streaked glass, listening to nothing and everything all at once. It wasn't rage she felt. It wasn't even sadness. It was readiness. Her phone rang. She picked it up. Alex didn't wait for pleasantries. The judge just accepted our motion. We're officially in court next week. ChatGPT, Janoi. Toa anko mui gyai kiet jin vin vien. Emily had never stepped into a place more sterile and yet more charged. Courtroom 3B was smaller than she'd imagined, not the grand cinematic halls she'd seen on television. No columns, no soaring ceilings, just cold lighting, old wood, and an undercurrent of anticipation. She sat beside Alex at the plaintiff's table. In front of them, Judge Carter arranged papers with deliberate care, not once glancing at either side. His robe hung stiffly over broad shoulders, and his eyes flicked up only once to scan the room before focusing on the docket. Across the aisle, Martha wore a navy blue blazer buttoned high, her expression a mask of dignified suffering. Richard sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Madison wore a smirk barely disguised as concern. Mr. Grant stood behind them like a stage manager in a courtroom drama, ready, rehearsed, and waiting for his cue. The spectators' bench was full. Emily felt their eyes like pinpricks against her back. Coworkers, neighbors, even one of her former professors from undergrad. And in the far left row, Carol sat quietly, her spine straight, hands folded around a notebook. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. The judge entered. The trial began. Opening statements were short, but each word landed with weight. Grant walked slowly across the floor, voice smooth. "This is a case of resentment, not righteousness. A daughter embittered by years of imagined neglect, now seeking to dismantle the very people who supported her from childhood." He gestured to Madison, who sniffled on cue. "We will show, through testimony and written correspondence, that Emily Alden gave support freely and consistently, and that her reversal now constitutes a breach of informal but understood agreement. A family contract in spirit, if not in ink." Emily stared straight ahead. She didn't blink. Not until Alex stood. He spoke plainly. "Families don't function on contracts. They function on trust, on fairness. And when that trust is abused, when help becomes expectation, and expectation turns into exploitation, someone has to say enough." He held up a packet of paper. "These," he said, "are bank transfers, tuition payments, mortgage supplements, and tax records. All from Ms. Alden's accounts. Over $180,000 paid over 15 years. No repayment, no agreement, just assumption." The judge nodded. "Let's proceed." Carol was called first. She moved slowly but confidently to the stand, her heels echoing in the silent room. "State your name for the record," Alex said. "Carol Elaine Whitmore," she replied. "And your relation to the plaintiff?" "I'm her aunt. Sister to Richard Alden." Alex nodded. "Ms. Whitmore, can you tell the court about the will of Thomas Whitmore? Your father?" Carol's voice didn't waver. She recounted how she had been pressured, coerced, and ultimately manipulated into signing away her share of the inheritance. She spoke of late-night conversations, subtle threats, and the years of isolation that followed. "They didn't ask for help," she said, her voice rising just enough to reach the back of the room. "They demanded it, then erased anyone who said no." Emily's hands clenched under the table. Grant attempted to poke holes in her story, but Carol remained composed. "I kept every email," she said at one point, lifting a folder. "I brought them with me." The gallery buzzed softly. Judge Carter raised a hand and silence returned. When Carol stepped down, she glanced once at Emily and gave a subtle nod. Alex leaned over and whispered, "We just laid the cornerstone." The judge called for a recess. As Emily stood, she caught Martha's eye across the room. Her mother didn't blink. Instead, she mouthed the words like a curse. "You will regret this." On the second day of trial, Madison cried. It wasn't remorse. It was strategy. Emily saw it from the moment Madison stepped into the witness box, her hair slightly tousled, eyes red but not puffy, as though she had timed each teardrop like a metronome. There were cameras today. Media had caught wind of the case. Daughter sues parents over forced financial servitude. And local reporters buzzed outside the courthouse like flies around a carcass. Inside courtroom 3B, the air was colder, the room quieter, tension heavier. Emily sat next to Alex, hands folded, spine straight. If yesterday had been laying the foundation, today would be the tremor. "State your name, please," Mr. Grant said gently, like he was asking a child. "Madison Claire Alden," she replied, sniffling delicately. "And your relation to the plaintiff?" "She's my older sister," Madison said, voice trembling as she glanced toward Emily. "Though it doesn't feel like that anymore." Emily didn't flinch. Neither did Alex, but she heard the quiet shuffle from the spectators, like sympathy shifting in their seats. "Can you tell the court about the financial support you received from your sister?" Madison took a deep breath, perfectly timed. "She helped, yes, but..." She never let me forget it. Every time she paid for something, it was like I owed her a part of myself. Like, my independence came with receipts. Grant nodded solemnly, placing a comforting hand on the edge of the witness box. Did you ever ask for these payments? I was told I needed help. I didn't know how to say no. Madison whispered, eyes filling with tears. It was either accept her help or be treated like a failure. A soft gasp escaped someone in the back row. Emily recognized the voice. Julie, from work. Alex stood slowly. No further questions from the defense? Judge Carter asked. No, Your Honor, Grant said, stepping aside. Your witness, the judge said, turning to Alex. He approached calmly, no papers in hand. Madison, Alex said, his tone so gentle it cut deeper. You say Emily treated her help like a chain? She did, Madison insisted. She held it over me. Alex nodded thoughtfully. And yet, in this financial ledger? He held up a binder. There are no recorded repayments from you. In fact, not a single attempt. Not even a thank you note. That's not fair. It's not about fairness, Alex interrupted. It's about numbers. Let's review, shall we? He moved to the screen. Slide after slide appeared. Tuition checks, car payments, a 6-month apartment lease Emily had covered during Madison's layoff. All signed, all dated, all paid in full. And this, he said, pulling up a scanned image, is a credit card bill from 2014. The charges were yours. The payment? Emily's. Madison squirmed. Now, Alex said, voice sharpening, do you recall a certain audio file entered into evidence yesterday? Madison's face paled. Yes. Alex looked to Judge Carter. With the court's permission, I'd like to replay a brief section. The judge nodded. A clerk clicked play. Martha's voice filled the room. Cold. Precise. Carol, don't be foolish. If you don't sign, you know what that means. Family won't protect you when the chips fall. Richard's voice followed, quieter but just as calculated. We've done enough for you. Sign it or move out. Carol's voice trembled, distant but clear. This isn't what Dad wanted. The audio stopped. The silence that followed felt deafening. Alex turned back to Madison. Do you recognize those voices? Madison looked cornered. Yes. And you still stand by your statement that your family never pressured anyone? I didn't. Judge Carter leaned forward, interjecting for the first time that morning. Ms. Alden, are you aware this recording undermines your credibility as a witness? Madison's mouth opened, then closed. Please step down, the judge said. As she exited the stand, she kept her head low, but not in shame. Emily caught it. The twitch in her jaw, the tension behind her brows. Madison was boiling. A recess was called. Emily stepped into the hallway, needing air when she saw her, Madison, curled into a bench, head down. But there were no tears now. Just clenched fists, shaky breaths, and eyes burning not with sorrow, but rage. Alex approached quietly. It's starting to unravel. Emily didn't respond. She didn't have to. The mask had slipped, and the world had started to see. On the third day, the audience came not to judge, but to watch someone fall. They packed the benches before the bailiff even opened the doors. Reporters whispered while their pens scribbled. Phones were tucked away, but everyone knew the clips would leak. Hashtags had already begun trending. Hashtag family vs. daughter. Hashtag dynasty on trial. What began as a local inheritance dispute had bloomed into a public reckoning, and Emily stood quietly in the storm's eye. Alex leaned over and whispered, They're not here for truth. They're here for spectacle. Emily adjusted her blazer and didn't reply. She already knew. Richard took the stand after the break. His tie was too tight, and the glare of the courtroom lights exposed the sweat above his brow. Still, he carried himself with a practiced calm, until he opened his mouth. My daughter, he began, glancing directly at Emily, was raised with everything. We made sacrifices, vacations, retirement plans to ensure she had a future. Alex didn't object. He wanted the speech. Richard continued, voice deepening. Now she paints us as parasites. That's not just hurtful. It's fiction. Emily remained still. Judge Carter asked, "Would you like to submit any documents to support these claims?" "Yes, Your Honor." Richard's attorney handed over a thin folder, the so-called mutual agreement. Emily recognized it immediately. So did Alex. "Your Honor," Alex said, rising, "may I request to review this document in full with the witness?" "Proceed." Judge Carter nodded. Alex approached slowly, opened the folder, and pulled the single sheet free. "Mr. Alden, this agreement claims Emily promised lifetime financial support to your other daughter, Madison. Signed in 2016, correct?" "Yes." Alex stepped closer. "And this was signed willingly in Emily's own home?" Richard paused. "Yes." "No duress? No pressure?" "None." Alex turned the document around and pointed to the signature. "That's odd, because this was dated April 2016. Emily was on a business trip in Tokyo that entire week. We have passport stamps and receipts." Richard blinked. "So?" Alex pressed. "Either she signed this remotely without a witness, which would make it invalid, or someone signed for her." The courtroom shifted, shoulders straightening, heads tilting. "Your Honor," Alex said, turning, "we have a handwriting expert on standby if needed." Judge Carter looked down, expression unreadable. "Continue." Alex set the document on the table and walked toward Emily. "Miss Alden, can you tell us about the financial assistance you've given your family over the last decade?" Emily's voice didn't tremble. "I paid for college tuition, car repairs, rent. I covered health insurance premiums for both my parents for 5 years. When Madison lost her job, I sent money monthly. No interest, no expectation, just family." Alex nodded. "And how did they respond?" "They didn't ask me to help," she said, each word slicing with precision. "They taught me that love equals compliance, that to say no was betrayal. I learned to smile through debt, to call silence loyalty." Her voice dropped. "I missed weddings, trips, therapy appointments, because I was always saving someone else." The silence afterward rang louder than any shout. Richard shifted on the stand, eyes narrowing. "You always had more than your sister? You never complained then?" "I was 21, Emily replied, voice sharpening. "I thought I was being good. Turns out I was being used." Alex turned back to Judge Carter. "No further questions." "Redirect?" the judge asked. Grant stood, but only for show. "No questions, Your Honor." Richard stepped down, noticeably smaller than when he took the stand. His gait was slower. He passed Emily, not looking at her, but everyone noticed the way his fingers trembled at his sides. The bailiff called a recess. Reporters rushed from the room. Emily stayed seated. Alex leaned close. "You broke him without yelling." Emily didn't smile. "I didn't come to yell. I came to finish." An hour later, they reconvened. Judge Carter sat straighter, voice steady. "We'll begin deliberations tomorrow morning." And just like that, the room deflated. Not over, but close. Emily exhaled, her breath shallow. Behind her, someone whispered, "She was always the quiet one." But now the quiet one had the world's attention. I wasn't nervous. I was numb. Truth weighs more than fear. The courtroom was still, holding its breath like it feared waking a god. Light filtered through high windows, bouncing pale across wood and skin and the backs of those who had spent days watching. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment, her fingers hovering like wings about to lift. Alex sat to my left, unreadable, but his hand hovered just inches from mine. Ready, if needed. But I didn't need grounding. I needed silence. Judge Carter adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. In the matter of Alden versus Alden, the court finds the plaintiff's claims, specifically the assertion of a lifetime financial obligation, to be unsubstantiated and without legal merit. I heard a sound, a sharp inhale, probably Madison, but I didn't turn to look. The document submitted as a mutual agreement, the judge continued, was either forged or acquired under undue pressure. Its inconsistencies, alongside evidence provided by the defense, render it void. I didn't exhale. I couldn't. This court recognizes a pattern of financial dependency masked as familial expectation. While not illegal in itself, the plaintiff's use of emotional coercion, combined with their legal escalation based on unverifiable evidence, constitutes what this court deems a malicious abuse of kinship. There was no gasp, no gavel slam, just words, heavy, deliberate. The court hereby dismisses all claims against Emily Alden. Furthermore, given the impact of these proceedings on the defendant's professional and emotional well-being, the plaintiffs are ordered to compensate partial legal costs and emotional damages in the amount of $47,000 silence. Then the bailiff shifted. A shoe squeaked. And still, I sat frozen. Miss Alden, Judge Carter added, glancing toward me now, you are free to go. Alex stood first. Carol reached forward from the second row and placed her hand on mine. You did it the right way, she whispered. Her voice was steady, no tremor. I turned slightly. My parents didn't move. Richard stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Martha's face was unreadable, frozen in the kind of smile you give a camera before it flashes. Madison stood abruptly, the screech of her chair sharp against the quiet, and walked out without a word. I didn't follow her. No one did. Reporters loitered outside the courtroom, but Alex guided us through a side hallway, his presence shielding me more than any words could. We didn't speak until we reached the parking garage. I leaned against a concrete pillar and stared at the low ceiling. It was cold here, and oddly safe. You should feel proud, Alex finally said. I don't, I replied. Not yet. Relieved? Number just hollow. He didn't press further, just stood beside me in the kind of silence only earned after war. Later that night, back in my condo, I didn't turn on the lights right away. The shadows made sense. I poured tea I didn't drink, checked my phone I didn't care about. I had won, technically. No debt, no shackles. But victory didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like an absence. Of weight, of noise, of obligation. And absence was not peace. The doorbell rang. Carol stood there holding a pie. Homemade, she said. Because if you're going to start over, you shouldn't do it on an empty stomach. I let her in. We didn't talk much. Just sat across from each other at my kitchen island while she sipped tea and I watched the steam curl upward like a ghost I almost recognized. We ate in slow bites. She asked no questions. I offered no analysis. At one point, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Your grandfather's handwriting, she said softly. It's the letter he never mailed you. Found it in a box last week. I took it, read it slowly. It didn't say much, just that he was proud of me, even when he wasn't sure what I was becoming. That kindness didn't have to mean sacrifice. That sometimes the people who need us most aren't family, but those brave enough to see us. When she left, I stood in the doorway and watched her disappear into the night. Judge Carter's words echoed again in my head. You're free to go. But I wasn't sure what freedom meant anymore. I don't dream about them anymore. But I still set 2 plates. By habit, not hope. The sun broke gently over Seattle that morning, casting amber light across the hardwood floor of my new kitchen. No more dark corners, no more whispering appliances, no more furniture chosen to impress someone else's taste. Everything here was mine, soft and intentional. The shelves were sparse. The walls still smelled faintly of paint. The dining table was small, round, set for 2 out of muscle memory. I noticed it every morning, and every morning I chose not to change it. It had been a year since the verdict. 12 months of therapy, of learning how to walk into a room without bracing for impact. 12 months of not checking my email every 5 minutes. Of grocery shopping without running into someone who just had a question about the trial. 12 months of relearning the shape of silence. Not the silence they used as punishment, but the kind that hummed like safety. Carol called at 9:03 like she always did on Saturdays. Her screen blinked to life with her usual crooked grin, half in shadows. Behind her, a window opened onto a landscape I didn't recognize. Mountains. A river, maybe. "Where are you now?" I asked, sipping my tea. "Somewhere in Montana. Or Idaho. Not sure anymore," she said. "But they make good pie here." "You always find the pie." "I go where I'm fed." She winked. "Speaking of, I joined that writing group I told you about. One of them read your statement in court." She cried. I smiled. It wasn't meant for crying, just understanding. Well, it hit the nerve anyway. She hesitated, then added, "You sure you don't want to talk to that nonprofit? They're doing a series on family legal abuse. It could help people." "I know," I said softly, "but I'm not ready to give it away. Not yet." She nodded, no disappointment in her eyes, just understanding. That was her gift. When the call ended, I sat in stillness for a while. No noise but the occasional creak of the building settling. I pulled out the drawer beside the table, one I had labeled with purpose. Archive. Not memory. Inside were the documents I kept not to remember but to never forget. At the top was the mortgage notice, now faded. Beneath it, the folded summons with that ridiculous claim of lifelong obligation. Below that, a transcript of Carol's testimony. I stopped there. No need to go further. The pain didn't live in the paper anymore. An envelope sat at the bottom. New, unmarked except for my name in a familiar hand. Madison's. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. The flap had already been sliced open. I didn't remember doing it. The letter was one line. "I'm pregnant. You'll never meet her." No return address, no apology, no context. Just a weapon masked as news. A parting shot, years too late. I folded the paper once, neatly, and slid it into the drawer, right beside the mortgage notice. I closed it with the same care I used to close conversations I knew wouldn't change anything. Alex stopped by in the afternoon, as promised. He brought fresh bread from a bakery I hadn't tried yet. The man was incapable of visiting empty-handed. "You look peaceful," he said as he stepped inside. "I feel quiet," I answered. He poured coffee while I sliced the bread. We didn't talk about court, or Madison, or Martha and Richard. We talked about books, about weather, about a dog that kept barking outside someone's window at 3 a.m., and whether it meant something deeper or just wanted in. He stayed for 23 minutes. It was enough. After he left, I walked out to the small balcony that overlooked a city I didn't owe anything to. No family name tied to every corner. No ghost in the hall. Just the hum of 1,000 strangers living lives I didn't need to save. The wind was light. Somewhere below, someone laughed. A child, maybe. I leaned on the railing and let it wash over me. Inside, the plates were still on the table. 2, as always. I didn't move them. Maybe one day I will. Or maybe not. Because sometimes healing isn't about subtraction. It's about coexisting with what remains. Habit doesn't mean hope, but it doesn't mean grief either. It means you once loved, or tried to. The sun shifted, pouring light through my window like it was spilling something sacred. I stood in it for a while, silent and full and alone, but not lonely. And then, like a quiet benediction, I whispered to no one, "I've met myself. That's enough." The courtroom is long silent, but the echoes of truth still linger. What they tried to bury in guilt and manipulation was finally unearthed, line by line, voice by voice. Justice is rarely immediate and never easy, But when the silence is broken, even the strongest illusions crumble. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Sometimes all it takes is one refusal to bow, for a lifetime of chains to snap. If you felt the weight of this story, please like, share, and leave your thoughts below. Comment 1 if you resonated with Emily's fight, or 2 if you feel there's still more to say.